Hello and welcome to this month's CCXP Tip of the Month. So, for February 2019, we're going to be looking at how to bounce back from failure. And specifically, obviously, what we're going to be talking about is you've studied very intensely for your CCXP exam and then you've fallen short. And it's a horrible feeling. I've been there as well. I know what it feels like. And sometimes students think, well, what else can I do differently? I've already done all of the studying. I don't know what else to go and do. So what should happen differently that will allow me to pass the second time as opposed to failing the first? So the good news is that I recorded a webinar recently with a number of folks. Jerry Angrave from a company called Empathize was on the webinar with me. Jerry runs his company out of London. It's a customer experience consulting and training company. And we talked about a bunch of different things in this webinar. We had two people that had passed the exam and they were talking about some of the strategies they used. And I asked Jerry, I said, well, look, Jerry, what happens when someone doesn't pass? Have you seen somebody do something different? Or is it a case of just studying harder? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you an excerpt from that video now where Jerry answers that question, and hopefully that will help anyone watching this who's failed the exam to feel a little bit better and a little bit more confident about your reset. Actually, something I wanted to touch on with you, Jerry, as well is I get a lot of emails sometimes from students who say, oh, I failed the exam, I got like a 76, or, they were close. And they ask me, well, what should I do differently? And, sometimes I'm in a situation where people will buy my simulator the day before the exam. And so that's not really what it's intended for, unless you just want to get a feel for it. It's intended to educate. But I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts if you've worked with any students that have failed in the past and then they've done something or they've gone through some kind of a structured approach that you've recommended that's then allowed them to make that leap to passing. Is there a strategy there that you know of?
Yeah, I'm the first thing to say is that if you don't pass the exam the first time, it doesn't mean you're not a competent customer experience professional. It just means that the questions haven't landed properly. If you've got through the assessment, the CXPA deem you to be pretty good and you'll know your way around customer experience. So hold on to that. Failing the exam doesn't mean that's taken away from you. So don't let that knock the confidence. So then I think the next point is to revisit, as you know, when you get your results, you get a breakdown of the scores. So you would look at, well, which of the 6 competencies did you score lowest in, and maybe use that as a focus for your next, for next time you come to do the exam. So, and there's all sorts, the reading you can do. But going on to your point, there was a lady I did work with who, she was a brilliant customer experience person, but just kind of struggled to get over that threshold of 80%. And as you say, I think I'm right to say when people fail, it's often only by 2 or 3 points. So the approach that she'd taken was to revise and read as much as possible. And come the first exam, I think the score was around 75%. So very quickly diving into, okay, I need to take this again, get this done. So same process, reading up on it, talking to other people, just looking at best practices around you, focusing on, you're reading all the books, looking at all the online magazines, and just really trying to soak in as much about customer experience as possible. In the second exam, the score went up by about 2 points. So we're still short of our 80, it was about 76, 77. What was really interesting, the way she approached the third one, and you can imagine by now there's quite a bit of pressure to pass, both that she was putting on herself and any colleagues who knew she was going through this process. But what was really interesting was she took quite there's that saying, isn't there, about if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. So she realized that it was necessary to change the approach. And so rather than try and read up on everything, she just, as Nicola said, just focused on the principles, those core principles. And Mike, you deal with these really, really well in that book. And she just kind of focused on what are the principles that the CXPA is getting at in each of the 6 competencies. Because you have to remember that by the time it comes to the exam, you kind of need to be a little bit in the CXPA mindset, because they're the ones that are asking the questions. So what's their take on what a customer experience strategy means? What's their take on customer experience culture? So she just focused on those core principles. And partly because one of the issues is in some of the questions you get in the exam, there's not a lot of context. And you have to make a judgment call, because you might say, well, actually, when I worked at XYZ, we would have done this, but when I worked at ABC, we might have done that. So if you understand those core principles, you can kind of rise above the detail and just apply that thinking to anything. The other thing from memory, what she said, the other important thing, and this goes back to your book again, Mike, was where you explain and you give sample questions, not only what the right answers are, but why those are the right answers. But then by default, you start to understand why the other answers are the wrong answers. And so just taking that approach by focusing on the principles and understanding more about how the questions work and what's right and what's wrong and why they're wrong, then that just prepared a lot better for the third exam. And kind of the third exam, the score went up by about 10 points and passed 85, 86 points. So it's having that perseverance, but just having that focus around those kind of core principles is, and I think that was a brilliant lesson. I hadn't appreciated that a way of doing it before, but I think it's quite an interesting approach if you don't pass first time.
So I hope that was helpful. One other thing I want to do quickly is thank Dr. Hitcham Name, who bought the platinum version of the simulator. So he used my CCXP Prepcast as well. And he wrote this really nice little article, which I'm going to show you now, basically talking about how he passed the CCXP exam, and also talking about why even getting the CCXP in the first place is important. So the article's called Why Customer Experience Matters and How to Become CCXP Certified. And what I really liked about this is he kind of makes the case at the beginning of the article about why it's important to become a CCXP. Then he goes on to talk about how he did it, and he nicely mentions both Ian Golding and myself, how he used the simulator, how he used the Prepcast. And he kind of talks about different things that worked for him, and then he goes on to talk about a number of different resources and links that he used as well, and he provides those for everybody to look at. And then he goes and talks about recommended books as well. So it's a very interesting article. I appreciate him mentioning me, and obviously that will be very useful for you guys as well as part of your exam prep. Okay, so that wraps up the tip of the month for February. So I hope that was useful. As always, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. The best way to get hold of me is on my email, support@ccxpexamsimulator.com. And until next time, happy studying.